Hey, AP World History. I am kidnapped to do this presentation for Jia Rong, Kaidi, Jia Ming, Jia Wei, Peng Chen, and George. They were assigned to do Chapter 27, Industrialization Outside the West. This chapter deals with two important nations that defied the common pattern of growing Western domination during the 19th century. And this group is responsible for Russia. You guys now should have the outline in front of you. If you don't receive one, just listen carefully to me. Let's get started. Change in Russia increased internal strains and led to revolution. Russia continued expanding its influence in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Russia's road to industrialization reflected its authoritarian tradition. It was marked by political repression and harsh conditions for workers that undercut social stability. First, let's talk about Russia reform and industrial advance.
What's up, AP kids? I am kidnapped too. Anyway, let's continue with Russia reforms and industrial advance. Russia moved into an active period of social and political reform in 1861 that established the base for industrialization by the 1890s. Immense social strain resulted as the government attempted to remain autocratic. The French Revolution and Napoleon's invasion of 1812 produced a backlash in Russia against Westernization. Conservative intellectuals embraced the turn to isolation as a way of vaunting Russian values and institutions, including serfdom. Some intellectuals remained fascinated with Western developments in politics, science, and culture. When Western-oriented army officers fomented the Decembrist revolt of 1825, Tsar Nicholas I repressed opposition. As a consequence, Russia escaped the European revolutions of 1830 and 1848.
Hello, I love you guys. Now, let's continue with economic and social problems. In economic terms, Russia fell behind the West because it failed to industrialize. Landlords increased exports of grain by tightening labor obligations on serfs. Russia remained a profoundly agricultural society dependent on unfree labor. The significance of the failure to industrialize was demonstrated by the Crimean War. Britain and France came to the support of the Ottomans and defeated the Russians because of their industrial economies. Tsar Alexander II was convinced that reforms were necessary and that meant resolving the issue of serfdom. Many individuals believed that a free labor force would produce higher agricultural profits. Others wished to end abuses and periodic peasant risings. Reform was seen as a way to protect distinctive Russian institutions, not to copy the West. What do you think?
Hey, I am back. Let's talk about the reform era and early industrialization now. The serfs were emancipated in 1861. They received land but did not gain any political freedoms. The emancipation created a larger urban labor force, but it did not spur agricultural productivity. Peasants continued to use old methods on their small holdings. Peasant risings persisted because of the enduring harsh conditions that were exacerbated by population growth. Reform had not gone far enough. Other efforts followed. In the 1860s and 1870s, Alexander II improved law codes and created local political councils with authority over regional matters. The councils gave political experience to middle-class people, but they had no influence on national policy. There was limited extension of the education system. During this era, literacy increased rapidly and a market for popular reading matter developed. Some women gained access to higher education and to the professions. In family organization, Russia followed earlier European trends. A move to industrialization was part of the process of change. State support was vital, since Russia lacked a middle class and capital. A railway system was created in the 1870s. It reached the Pacific in the 1880s. The railways stimulated the iron and coal sectors, as well as the export of grain to the West. They also opened Siberia to development and increased Russian involvement in Asia. Alexander II was assassinated in 1881. His successors opposed reform and continued political, religious, and ethnic repression. By the 1890s, new protest currents appeared. Marxist socialism spread among the intelligentsia. Lenin attempted to make Marxism fit Russian conditions and organized disciplined cells to work for the expected revolution. At the same time, working class formed unions and strikes, both illegal, to compensate for lack of political outlets. By the 1900s, the contradictory currents in Russian society may have made revolution inevitable. Military defeat in 1904 and 1905 finally lit this tinderbox. The revolution of 1905 came.
Now, let's talk about the revolution of 1905. Russia had continued imperialist expansion. Through the 19th and into the 20th century, gains were made. Against the Ottomans in the 1870s, new Slavic nations, Serbia and Bulgaria, were created, and conservatives talked of Russian leadership, of the pan-Slavic movement. In the Middle East and Central Asia, Russia was active in Persia and Afghanistan. In China, the Russians moved into Manchuria and gained long-term leases to territory. Russia encountered the similarly expanding Japanese and was defeated in the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905. The loss unleashed protests in Russia. Urban workers and peasants joined the liberal groups in the revolution of 1905. The government bowed and created a national parliament, the Duma. Minister Stolypin introduced important peasant reforms, greater freedom from redemption payments and liberal purchase and sale of land. He aimed to create a market-oriented peasantry divided from the rest of the peasant mass. Some entrepreneurs among the peasants, kulaks, did increase production. But the reform package quickly fell apart as the Tsar withdrew rights, took authority away from the Duma, and resumed police repression.
Last but not least, let's talk about Russia and Eastern Europe. After the loss to Japan, Russian foreign activities returned to the Ottoman Empire in Eastern Europe. Hungary, Romania, Serbia, Bulgaria, Greece, some nations recently gaining independence from the Ottomans, established parliaments elected by carefully restricted voters. Kings ruled without much check. Most nations abolished serfdom, but landlord power remained extensive and peasant unrest continued. In the midst of their many problems, Eastern Europeans enjoyed, during the late 19th century, a period of cultural productivity that helped to enhance their sense of national heritage. Russian novelists, such as Turgenev, Dostoevsky, and Tolstoy, gained world fame.
In music, composers moved from the brilliant romanticism of Tchaikovsky to innovative atonal styles. Eastern European composers, such as Chopin and Liszt, produced important works. In science, the Czech Mendel advanced the study of genetics and the Russian Pavlov contributed in physiology. Oh, I guess that is the end of our presentation. Thank you guys, thank you for listening.